Hello, my name is William, and welcome to Dragon X Dominion, a realm where dragon legends are forged in fire, honor, and forgotten worlds. I will be your narrator and guide through these epic lands. If you crave powerful stories, legendary dragons, and wars that echo through eternity, then you found your home, ladies and gentlemen. So like, subscribe, and claim your place among these legends. The smell of engine grease never fully left Ren Calloway's hands. He had stopped trying to scrub it out years ago. It lived in the cracks of his knuckles, under the edges of his nails, deep in the whorls of his fingertips. Some of the older Vreth in the settlement said that a person's hands told the truth about who they were. If that was true, then Ren's hands told a simple story. He fixed things. That was what he did. That was mostly all he did. He worked the night repair shift at the colony's mechanical depot. 6 hours of broken conveyors, snapped coupling rods, and pressure valves that hissed like angry animals. By the time his shift ended, the 2 moons of Draveth were already low on the horizon, and the settlement was the kind of quiet that only existed in the hours before anything stirred. He liked that quiet. He had built his whole life around it, piece by piece, the same way he rebuilt machines. Carefully, without hurrying. Without needing anyone to watch, he was walking home along the outer path, the long way, the one that ran beside the Vreth residential boundary when he first saw it. A shape. Small. Sitting perfectly still in front of his door. He stopped walking. His first thought was that someone had left a package. His second thought, when the shape moved its head and 2 amber eyes caught the moonlight, was that it was not a package at all. It was a dragon hatchling, small enough that he could have held it in both arms. Its scales were a deep blue-black, the kind of color that shifted between the two depending on how the light fell. Its wings were folded tight against its sides. Its tail was wrapped neatly around its own feet. It looked, Ren thought, like a creature that had been sitting in that exact spot for some time and had made a decision to be patient about it. He stood at the edge of his path and looked at it. It looked back at him. He had lived beside the Vreth for 4 years. He knew their young were called hatchlings, that they were not dangerous, that they were curious in the way that young things always were. He had repaired navigation crystals for a few of the elder Vreth at the depot, careful, delicate work that most of his colleagues refused because Vreth tech was too fiddly. Ren did not find it fiddly. He found it interesting. He had never, however, had one sitting outside his door before. He walked closer, slowly. The hatchling did not move. It tracked him with those amber eyes, steady, unblinking, not afraid. Ren stopped about 2 meters away and crouched down so he was closer to its height. "Hello," he said, because he did not know what else to say. The hatchling clicked its tongue once. It was a short, dry sound, like a single tap on hollow wood. Ren had heard that sound from adult Vreth before. It meant something like acknowledgement. Or perhaps like, "Yes, I heard you. I am thinking about it." They stayed like that for a moment. Ren, the hatchling. The quiet. Then he stood up, stepped past it carefully without getting too close, and went inside. He left the door open for a few seconds longer than necessary. Nothing came in. When he looked back through the small window beside the door, the hatchling was still sitting in the same spot, facing the door, tail still wrapped around its own feet. He watched it for a while. It did not leave. It did not try to come in. It simply sat. Around the time the first light started touching the edge of the sky, Ren looked again. It was gone. He told himself it had probably wandered off from one of the Vreth families nearby. Young ones sometimes did. It would find its way back. He went to sleep, slept 4 hours, woke up, and went to work. When he came home the next night, it was sitting there again. Same spot, same posture, same amber eyes catching the moonlight. It looked at him the way the last time it had, without fear, without aggression, without any particular urgency. Just steady watching, Ren stood in front of it for a moment. Then he went inside, found a bowl, filled it with water, and set it just outside the door within reach. The hatchling looked at the bowl. It looked at him. It made the clicking sound again. Ren went inside and did not watch from the window this time, because something about watching felt wrong, like reading someone's private letter. He made himself tea. He sat in his chair. He listened to the quiet. In the morning, the bowl was empty. The hatchling was gone. On the third night, he set out water and a small portion of dried meat from his own rations, the kind the Avrath at the depot sometimes traded for. He did not know if hatchlings ate the same things as adult Avrath. He did not know much. He figured water and something real was better than nothing. He did not touch the hatchling. He did not try to approach it. He just set the bowl down, nodded once in its direction the same way he might nod at a colleague whose name he didn't yet know, and went inside. He could not have explained if anyone had asked why he did not simply report it to the colony office. What he could have said, if pressed, was this: whatever that small creature was waiting for, it was not bothering anyone. It was sitting quietly outside a door, alone, in the dark, every single night. Ren knew something about that. He figured it deserved at least a bowl of water. By the seventh night, Ren had a routine. He came home from the depot, changed out of his work clothes, and filled the bowl before he did anything else. Water first, then a portion of food. He set it outside without ceremony, gave a single nod toward wherever the hatchling was sitting, and went in. He did not linger. He did not try to make it something bigger than it was. But on the eighth morning, when he stepped out before his shift, the hatchling was still there. It had never stayed past dawn before. It was sitting in the pale early light with its wings slightly open, not spread wide, but cracked apart the way a person might hold a coat open to let out heat. It looked smaller in daylight somehow, more real, more fragile. It also looked at him with an expression that Ren, who was not an expert in dragon faces, could only describe as tired. He crouched down. "You all right?" he said. The hatchling clicked once, slowly. Then it closed its wings and looked away down the path. Ren was late to his shift for the first time in 3 years. That afternoon, he found Dav at the depot. Dav ran the parts inventory and had lived on Draveth longer than almost anyone in the human settlement. He had a Avrath trading partner, a standing arrangement with 2 elder families, and an opinion on everything. Ren did not usually ask Dav for opinions. He made an exception. "Small one," Dav said, leaning back in his chair. "Blue-black scales, you said? Amber eyes?" "That's right." Dav's expression shifted. Not dramatically, just a small change around the eyes, a pause before he spoke again. "That sounds like it could be Avrath's hatchling." "Who is Avrath?" "Was," Dav said. "She died about 2 months ago. One of the younger Avrath females in the East residential section. Something happened. I don't know the full story. Nobody tells us the full story. But she didn't have clutchmates, and the hatchling was only a few seasons old when it happened." He paused. "I didn't know what came of the young one. I assumed one of the elder families took it in." "Nobody did?" Ren asked. Dav spread his hands. "Apparently not, if it's sleeping outside your door." Ren thought about this on the walk home. He thought about it while he filled the bowl. He thought about it while he sat in his chair in the dark that night, listening to the silence outside his door, which was not quite as silent as it had been before he knew there was something sitting in it. The next day, he went to the colony records office and asked, as plainly as he could, whether there was any registered placement for an unhoused Avrath hatchling. The clerk looked at him oddly. The records showed nothing. The Avrath community handled their own internal placements. The colony did not track them unless there was a formal joint custody arrangement, which there never had been, so there was no record and no placement. And a small creature sitting outside his door every night. That same week, one of the Avrath elders came into the depot. His name was Voruk. He was broad and old, his scales more gray than whatever color they had been in his youth, and he moved with the deliberate slowness of someone who had decided long ago that rushing was for other people. He brought a scout glider's guidance crystal, cracked along one face, the internal lattice disrupted. Most of Ren's colleagues would have told him to order a replacement. Ren looked at it for a long moment, then took it to his bench. It took him 2 hours and tools that were technically not meant for Avrath equipment. But the lattice held. The crystal would work. He wrapped it carefully and handed it back without charging for the labor. Vorik turned the crystal over in his large hands. He looked at it. He looked at Ren. "You are the one on the outer path," Vorik said. His human language was slow and deliberate, but clear. "Unit 41. That's right," Ren said. Vorik made a sound in his chest. Low, resonant, like a single note held for half a second. Ren had not heard it before. He stored it away. "She chose well," Vorik said. "Who did?" Ren asked. But Vorik had already turned and was walking out, and Ren got 3 more repair orders before he could think about it further. That night, he sat outside his own door for the first time. He brought a small repair job with him, a handheld calibration tool with a sticky switch, and worked on it by the low light of the outer lamp. He did not do it because he planned to. He did it because it felt like the right thing to do, and Ren had learned over many years of fixing things that when something felt structurally correct, it usually was. The hatchling arrived about an hour after dark, same as always. It stopped when it saw him sitting there. It looked at him. He looked at it. He went back to his work. After a while, it sat down, closer than usual. Still not close enough to touch, but closer. Ren worked. The hatchling watched. The 2 moons crossed the sky above them. Nobody said anything, because there was nothing yet that needed saying. Something was beginning between them, slowly and without announcement, the same way a crack in a crystal begins to heal when the conditions are exactly right. There is a kind of silence that is full, and a kind that is empty. Ren had lived with the empty kind for years. He knew its specific weight, how it sat in a room, how it followed a person from one space to another, how it was loudest right before sleep. He had gotten used to it the way a person gets used to a low, persistent sound, not by ceasing to notice it, but by deciding not to let it stop him from moving. The silence that had begun gathering on his doorstep was different. It was the full kind. It had something in it. He started sitting outside every evening. He always brought work. A small repair, a piece of equipment to calibrate, wiring to check over. He did not look at the hatchling more than necessary. He did not try to close the distance between them. He just worked, and the hatchling sat nearby, and the nights passed. On the 12th evening, he dropped a coupling wrench. It hit the ground and skidded half a meter away from him. He reached for it and found it was just beyond his fingertips. He would have had to stand up to get it. Before he could, something small and warm nudged it back toward his hand. He looked up. The hatchling was sitting back now, having pushed the wrench with the flat of one folded wing. It looked at him with those amber eyes and clicked its tongue. Ren picked up the wrench. "Thank you," he said. The hatchling clicked again. Then it sat back down in its spot and looked away into the dark as if nothing had happened. Ren held the wrench in his hand for a moment. He noticed his heart was doing something slightly irregular. He went back to work. The next day, he found Vorik at the communal water station near the depot. He had been looking for a chance to ask his question for days. He asked it plainly. "The hatchling at my door," he said. "Why does she come there? What is she looking for?" Vorik was quiet for a moment, the way he was always quiet before speaking, as though words were something he measured before spending them. "When a young one loses their clutch parent," he said at last, "they sometimes go to the last place the parent went. They wait there. They do not know why, not in a way they could tell you. It is something older than thought. They go because the trail ends there, and they are not ready for the trail to end." Ren was quiet after that. "She is not looking for you," Vorik continued, not unkindly. "She is looking for what she had. She is looking at the place where it stopped." Ren absorbed this. "Her mother came to my door?" "Yes." "Why?" Vorik looked at him steadily. "That is a longer answer. I will tell you when I know you better." It was not a brush-off. It was said with complete seriousness, the way an elder speaking to someone younger delivers a fact about time. Ren accepted it. He walked home slowly that night. He thought about a small hatchling sitting outside a door in the dark, night after night, not because anything was there, but because the trail ended there, and she had nowhere else to put her waiting. He thought about how grief sometimes worked that way, how a person could return to a place not because it held answers, but because leaving it felt like abandoning the last thread of something. He had done that too. He still did it. In quieter ways, he arrived home. The hatchling was already there, earlier than usual. She was sitting with her wings slightly spread again, the same way she had that one morning. The posture he had come to understand meant she was tired or unsettled. Ren set down his bag. He looked at her. Then, instead of sitting at his usual distance, he moved his chair a meter closer than before and sat down without making anything of it. The hatchling looked at the chair, looked at him, did not move away. He started working on a pressure valve. The hatchling watched his hands. She had always watched his hands. He had noticed that early. She watched them the way young things watched anything that moved with purpose and intention, trying to decode the pattern. After a while, she shifted forward. Not all the way to him. Just forward. As if she too had moved her chair. They sat like that for 2 hours. When he finally stood to go inside, she was close enough that he could have reached out and touched the top of her head. He did not. He nodded at her, the same way he always did, and went inside. He lay in his bed that night and stared at the ceiling. He thought about what Vorik had said. She is not looking for you. He understood that. He did not need her to be looking for him. He was not looking for her either, not in any way he could have named. He was just a man who fixed things, sitting outside his own door, and she was a small creature carrying a loss too big for her size. And somehow those two facts had found each other. He did not know if that was enough. He suspected, for now, that it was. The notice arrived on a Thursday. It was printed on official colony paper, pale blue, which meant administrative, and it had been slid under Ren's door while he was at work. He found it when he got home, sitting on the floor beside his boots, and he read it twice before he fully understood what it was saying. It was from a man named Brint, who worked in colony housing coordination. The notice informed Ren that an unregistered Avrath hatchling had been observed at his residential unit on multiple occasions, that no formal arrangement had been filed, and that the colony policy on unhoused minors of any species required placement in a registered care unit. He was to present himself at the administrative office the following week for a coordination meeting, and the hatchling was to be transferred to the Avrath communal residential block on the east side of the settlement. Ren folded the notice. He put it on his table. He sat down and looked at it. Then he stood up, went outside, and sat in his chair. The hatchling arrived 20 minutes later. She stopped when she saw him. She looked at him in that steady way of hers, reading something in his posture. He had begun to think she was quite good at reading things she had no formal language for. She clicked once, a short, careful sound, and came forward and sat beside his chair instead of across from it. Ren looked at the top of her small, dark head. "They want to move you," he said. She could not understand the words, but she tilted her head slightly, the way she sometimes did when something in his tone caught her attention. He exhaled. "It's not going to be that simple," he said. He went to the meeting. It was not just Brint. There were 4 humans and 2 Avrath elders in the room, which surprised him. One of the Avrath was Vorik. The other was a younger elder named Greth, who held herself very straight and watched Ren with the particular expression of someone who had already formed an opinion. Brint explained the policy. He explained it carefully and not unkindly. There was no registered arrangement. There was no precedent. The colony could not have unhoused Avrath young living informally beside human residents without documentation, without oversight, without any formal structure in place. It was not about Ren personally. It was simply about order. Ren listened to all of it. He did not interrupt. When Brint finished, Ren said, "What paperwork do I need to file?" Brint blinked. "To transfer the hatchling to the communal unit?" "No," Ren said. "To stay." The room was quiet for a moment. Greth spoke. Her human language was sharper than Vorik's, faster, with an edge in it. "A human has never served as ward for a Avrath young. It is not a thing that is done." "Has it ever been tried?" Ren asked. "No. So there's no rule against it," Ren said. Just no one has tried. The spirit of the custom. I don't know your customs as well as I should, Ren said. I'll learn them, whatever is required. He kept his voice flat and even, not aggressive, not pleading, just stating a position the same way he would state a mechanical fact. I'm not asking for anything unusual. I'm asking what needs to be done. I'll do it. Greth looked at Vorok. Vorok said nothing. He was watching Ren. Brint shuffled his papers. The issue is precedent. If we allow, she chose where she waits, Vorok said. His voice was quiet and carried the room anyway. Among our people, a hatchling's instinct in grief is not overruled by administration. He looked at Greth. You know this. Greth said nothing. We can argue the categories, Vorok continued. But the hatchling chose the door. That is the fact. Everything else is paperwork. Brint looked like a man who had come in expecting a simple transfer and had ended up at the edge of something much larger than his office handled. To his credit, he did not retreat behind the policy. He thought for a moment and then said, if both parties, the colony administration and the Avrath Elder Council, agree to a provisional arrangement with quarterly review, I can process it as a joint custody exception. It is not a category that exists yet. I would have to create it. Create it, Ren said. More silence. It was Greth who broke it. She was looking at Ren now with an expression he could not fully read. Not hostility exactly, more like someone recalculating something. You understand that if this arrangement is approved, you become responsible to us as much as to the colony. We will have oversight. You will be accountable to the Elder Council. That's fine, Ren said. You would accept that? From us? I fix Vreth equipment when no one else will, Ren said. I don't see why this is different. Greth made a sound, not the resonant approval note he had heard from Vorok before. Something more guarded than that. But she did not object again. The provisional arrangement was drafted before the end of the meeting. It had no formal name yet, because no formal name existed for it. Brint filed it under a category he labeled Joint Minor Welfare, Cross-Species, Pending Permanent Classification, and initialed the bottom with the expression of a man doing something that would either be very ordinary in 10 years or a significant footnote in colonial history. Ren walked home. The hatchling was already there. She looked up at him when he arrived. Still here, he said to her. She clicked once. He sat down and got to work. 2 weeks after the meeting, Vorok came to the depot alone and asked if Ren had a few minutes. Ren had just finished a shift. He said yes. They walked to the end of the parts yard where the old storage containers sat in a row along the outer fence, and there was nothing around them but open space and the smell of metal and dry grass. Vorok was quiet for a moment in the way that had stopped bothering Ren. It was not awkward silence. It was just the way the elder organized himself before saying something he had been carrying for a while. I told you before that Avrath, the hatchling's mother, came to your door, Vorok said. I told you there was a longer answer to why. I remember, Ren said. She came because she had heard about you. Vorok folded his large hands together. Before she died, the Vreth who came to the depot spoke of you. They said there was a human on the night shift who handled our equipment carefully, who did not treat it as strange or lesser, who charged only for the parts, not for the time. He paused. Avrath heard this. She decided you were someone who might listen without judgment. Ren waited. Her hatchling had unusual scale coloring from birth, Vorok continued. Blue-black, the kind that shifts in light. Among some older Vreth families, there is a belief that this pattern is a sign of illness. Avrath did not believe the old stories, but she was a new mother, and she was afraid. She wanted to ask whether there was any human medical knowledge about coloring variations in Vreth young. He looked at Ren steadily. She was not sick. The hatchling was not sick. Avrath simply wanted to be told by someone she trusted that her child was fine. Ren was quiet. She came to your door at night, after the depot shift. You were not home. Vorok's voice did not carry accusation. It was just a fact, delivered with the same weight as all his facts. She went home. 3 days later, she was killed in a ground vehicle failure on the East Road. It was no one's fault. It was a mechanical error in a part that had nothing to do with your depot. Ren looked at the ground. Something in his chest had gone very still, the way a machine goes still right before it either restarts or doesn't. She did not die because you were not home, Vorok said. You must understand that clearly. There is no fault on you. I am telling you this because you should know what her last days held. She was not frightened. She was not desperate. She was a mother who wanted to hear good news from a trustworthy person, and she ran out of time before she could. Ren exhaled slowly. Does the hatchling know? No. She is too young to know the details. She knows only that her mother came here last. Her instinct brought her to this door. That is all she has been doing, standing at the last place on the trail, waiting for something she cannot name. Ren thought about that for a long time after Vorok left. He thought about it during the walk home, and while he filled the bowl, and while he sat in his chair in the early dark. He thought about a young mother who had heard that someone was careful with delicate things and had decided that was worth trusting. He thought about the particular cruelty of timing. Not malice, not mistake, just the ordinary collision of one person's absence with another person's need at exactly the wrong moment. He thought about how much of grief was just that, not anyone's fault. Just time running out before things could be said. The hatchling arrived in the middle of all this thinking. She went to her usual spot and looked at him and clicked once, but he did not respond right away. He was somewhere else for a moment. She waited, then the sky cracked open. Rain on Dravath was not gentle. It came in hard sheets, sudden and total, the way a curtain drops. Within seconds the ground was dark and running with water. The hatchling flattened herself and spread her wings slightly over her own back. The instinctive shelter posture, useful when she was older and larger, not very useful yet. Ren stood up. He looked at her in the rain. He thought about closing the door. He thought about the bowl of water being unnecessary tonight. He thought about a lot of things all at once in no particular order. Then he stepped back into his doorway and left the door open, wide open. He walked to his chair inside, sat down, picked up a piece of work from the table, and did not look at the door. He heard the rain. He heard it for a long time. Then he heard something else. Small, careful footsteps on the threshold. A pause. Then the footsteps continued inside. He did not look up. He kept his eyes on his work. The hatchling walked a slow circle around the room, examining it the way she examined everything, carefully, completely, with full attention. She paused at the window. She paused at the workbench along the far wall. She paused at the shelf where a small row of photographs stood, most of them tilted slightly away from the room, not removed but not fully facing out either. She looked at the photographs for a long time. Then she looked at Ren. He looked up. Their eyes met. She made a low sound, something he had not heard from her before. Soft, held, close to a hum. It sounded in some way he could not have explained, like the word yes. She walked to the mat beside the heating unit, turned once, lay down, and closed her eyes. Ren sat in his chair and did not move for a long time. Then, quietly, he reached over and straightened one of the photographs so that it faced the room again. He did not know why he did it. It felt right. And things that felt right usually were. One full season passed. Dravath's seasons did not change temperature the way most worlds did. They changed light. The length of it, the color of it, the angle at which it fell. In the long light season, Ren's workshop filled with warmth from mid-morning until late evening, and the hatchling, who had never officially been given a name by the colony's records. The paperwork still had her listed as Avrath Hatchling, Ward Provisional, had taken to sleeping on the secondary perch Ren had built beside his workbench. A flat, padded shelf at the right height and width for a creature her size, secured with proper load-bearing brackets. Because Ren did not build things he was not sure of. She had a name. She had always had one, a Avrath name, a sound more than a word. But Ren had asked Vorok how to say it and practiced until he got close enough. Sora. 2 notes, the second one lower. She turned her head every time he said it correctly, which was most of the time now. Sora had learned to hand him tools. This had started as coincidence and become a system. She watched his hands the way she always had, and somewhere in those weeks of watching, she had learned which tool came next in a given sequence. She would pick it up before he asked and hold it out, and Ren would take it without breaking his focus, and they would continue in that way for an hour or two without speaking much at all. Dav, who had stopped by to see the arrangement for himself, had watched this for 5 minutes and then said he had never seen a repair process run that smoothly. The welfare report from the colony specialist was 3 pages long. The relevant sentence was near the end. The hatchling had developed more functional use of human language in 1 season in this ward arrangement than in her full previous year in the communal care block, attributed likely to sustained proximity and consistent verbal engagement. What the report did not say, because reports do not say things like this, was that the reason Sora heard so much human language was because Ren talked while he worked, narrated what he was doing, explained problems out loud, said things to the equipment that he had previously only said to himself. He had done this alone for years. He had simply, gradually, stopped being alone while he did it. The formal review took place in the colony's main hall, which was the largest indoor space in the settlement and which had never before hosted a joint human-Vreth legal proceeding. Both communities came, not because they were required to, but because the thing being decided was genuinely new, and people wanted to see what it looked like when something new was decided carefully. Vorak spoke. Dav spoke. The welfare specialist submitted her report. Brint, looking less out of his depth than he had 4 months ago, presented the provisional arrangements record and recommended permanent classification. Greth spoke last. She said that she had watched the arrangement, that the Elder Council had discussed it at length, and that while there was no tradition that covered it, there was no tradition that forbade it either. She said that Sora was healthy, engaged, and growing. She said, in a tone that was still guarded but no longer had an edge, that the Vreth people recognized a debt of trust, where trust had been extended and honored. The wardship was made permanent. It took 11 minutes. After, a young Vreth named Tail, who was doing a study on interspecies relations for the Colonial Education Program, approached Ren with a recording device and a question. He spoke careful, slightly formal human language, the kind learned from books rather than conversation. "I have one question, if you permit," Tail said. "When the hatchling began waiting at your door, why did you agree to keep her? What was the benefit to you? What was your reasoning?" Ren thought about it. He thought about it honestly, turning it over the way he turned over a broken component to find the actual problem rather than the obvious one. "She waited outside my door every night," he said. "Nobody does that unless they need something. And I had a door." He paused. Seemed like enough of a reason. Tail wrote this down with the expression of someone who had expected a different kind of answer and was not sure what to do with the one he had received. Vorak, standing nearby, made the resonant low note of approval and said nothing else. That evening, the settlement held its first joint festival. Not the first ever attempted, but the first where Vreth and humans shared the same ground, the same fires, the same tables of food. It had been planned for months, its timing coinciding with the end of the wardship review by chance or by someone's quiet intention. Music was played that no one had heard before because it was being made up as it went. 2 traditions finding the notes they had in common. Late at night, when things were winding down, Ren and Sora walked home together. She rode on his shoulder. She was still small enough for this, barely, and both of them understood without saying so that this would not last much longer. Her claws were careful on his shoulder. She was always careful with things that could be hurt. They walked under both moons. The settlement lights spread behind them. Ahead was the outer path, the long way home, the one Ren had always taken because he liked the quiet. Sora shifted on his shoulder. She had been forming something for a while. He could feel the small tension in her, the concentration. She did this sometimes before she spoke, the way a person clears their throat before saying something they have practiced. She said, very clearly, in careful and deliberate human language, Ren, tomorrow. You fix the wing joint on Elder Vorok's scout glider. I will hand you the tools. Ren stopped walking. He stood there on the path for a moment, under the two moons, holding the weight of a small dragon on his shoulder. And he laughed. It came out of him suddenly and completely, the way laughter does when it has been saving itself up. Yeah, he said, when he could. Okay, deal. Sora clicked once, satisfied. They walked the rest of the way home in the full kind of silence, the kind that was not empty at all.